What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to cover how to do SQL work using Python. We are going to cover the most common things you would need to do in SQL. So creating databases and tables, inserting new data into SQL, reading data from SQL, updating existing data sets, deleting existing data from data sets, and then we're going to take a look at a pretty cool combination of using SQL and Python to go through a data set and remove duplicates. So before we dive into this too much, all of the code that I'll be using as an example in this tutorial and covering line by line will be available at the GitHub link in the description of this video below. Please consider leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel. It really helps me grow. And if you love the content on the channel, there's a Patreon link down there as well. Consider checking that out. Okay, so now let's dive into the content and take a look at how to create a table and a database connection to SQL in Python. All right, so let's start with creating a table and a database in Python for SQL, okay? And so everything I'm gonna do today is using the SQLite 3 Python module. So you'll need import SQLite 3 at the top, and you'll probably hear me say SQL and SQL throughout this tutorial. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and that's commonly abbreviated SQL, so either are valid, but you need to start with import SQLite 3. If you don't have it installed, it's usually one of the modules that comes installed with Python today, but you can run pip and install that. And the first thing you want to do is establish a connection, so put that in a variable. I always call it connection, but you can call it whatever you want. Put that in a variable and just do SQLite 3.connect, okay? And then here you need the name of what you want your database to be called. If it exists, it'll connect to it already. If it doesn't exist, it'll actually make this database. So I'm gonna call it lemastertech.db. This .db just means database. And you can see in my folder on the left, or hopefully you can see, I know it's a little small, there is no lemastertech.db, but when I boot this up and run it, it's going to create a lemastertech.db, okay? So the next thing you want to do is create a cursor, and a cursor is the thing that actually lets you send and receive commands back and forth. So for cursor, we're going to do cursor equals connection, our variable from before, dot, and then cursor, okay? That's a built-in part of the SQLite package. And this cursor is going to be our communication tool back and forth. All right, so now let's say that we want to make a table that's going to be a list of data. So each entry will have, I'm going to use, since it's lemastertech.db, I'm going to use videos that I've done. So I'm going to have the name of the video, how many views it had, and then the date. This will let you see 3 different types of data, okay? And in SQL, the date format is year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, okay? So each entry is going to have that. Now let's create the SQL command. And to do this, we make a SQL command inside of triple quotes, okay? So this is the way to do a long block of text in Python, and it must be written in SQL format, okay? So you can't use Python format to write SQL commands. It has to be in SQL format. Luckily, SQL format is not that hard. It's very logical, and you can find all these common examples online. But let's take a look at how to create a table, okay? So I make my triple quotes, and literally the instruction for creating a table is create table, all caps like that, okay? And then just the name of the table, and I want to be called sample because it's my sample table. I'm just showing you guys a sample table. And then inside of parentheses, put your variables in there. So the column names that I want, I'm gonna have vid name, and then you need to define what variable type it'll be. And again, you can find the variable types available in SQL online. But essentially a varchar is their version of a string. It's like variable character, okay? So it could be alphanumerical, punctuation, anything. So I'm gonna, and then the 30 means it could have up to 30 characters. And then I'm gonna have view count as another column, and that will be an integer. And again, this isn't going to be a real in-depth tutorial on SQL itself. So if any of the SQL pieces here confuse you and just following along isn't enough for you, let me know in the comments below and I can do more SQL content down the line. And obviously let me know in the comments if you have any questions about anything you see here. Okay, and then I'm going to say when it was published, and that variable will be a date format. Okay. So these are the 3 columns that I'm going to put in my table. Obviously, put whatever columns you want in your table inside these parentheses, and then just put the close parentheses and then the 3 quotation marks to end your SQL command. And now we have this variable SQL command that we're going to send to the cursor using cursor.execute and then put in here SQL command. And one thing I want to note, you could copy this whole thing and put it inside of these parentheses. I do not find that that makes the code easier to read. I actually think it makes the code harder to read, which is why I like to break it out, and then it's super clear where all of your command stuff is. But it would be valid to copy this whole thing inside here, and you could even use single quotes if you did that. All right, and then something you want to do at the end every time you're done working with SQL is do connection.close. Okay, so this is really important to make sure that every change that you actually make is finished, and then you terminate the process. You don't want an open connection to SQL if you're done using it. All right, so this is it for creating a database and creating a table. I'm going to run this, and the only thing we're going to see right now is if everything worked, you're not going to get an error code. That just means that it worked properly. But what you might have seen is over on the left in my file folder, in my structure, lemastertech.db was created. Now, if you were to click it and try to view it in like plain text, it's going to look kind of janky. Because PyCharm and most IDEs other than like Microsoft Visual Studio don't have a good built-in tool for reading this data. So the next portion is going to be how do we insert data and then how do we read data? Because right now we've created a database, but there's no data in it. So next step is we're going to look at inserting data. All right, so for inserting data, the only thing I'm going to start from is a list with my actual data. So remember, I made a table that is going to receive the name of the video, the view counts for the video, and then the date it was published. And I don't have it in any particular order. It's not in date or view count or anything like that arranged. It's just a list of lists that I called videos. So let's take a look at how to get this list stored inside my SQLite database, okay? So the first couple lines are going to be exactly the same. You always need to have SQLite 3 in your project. If you're doing all of this in the same .py file, you probably already have it there. You need that connection every time equals SQLite 3 connect. And so for future steps, I'm not going to do these every time. I'm just going to copy them from the previous step. I just want to make it clear these things always need to be in there. So connection and cursor are going to be the same for basically every single project, every single step that we do in this tutorial. Okay, so you need a connection and you need your cursor. Now we have our list of videos, and now let's take a look at how to move these videos into SQL. And it's actually really simple, okay? So we are going to go through the entire list and just say for I or item, whatever you want to call it, in range length of videos. Okay, so for every entry that I have in my videos list, I want to make these intermediate variables name equals to videos at I, so my list entry at whatever index I'm doing. And then the first variable is going to be, which is actually 0, because in Python lists you start counting from 0. Hopefully you know that. If you're doing stuff like messing with SQL, hopefully you know enough Python to know you start counting from 0. But so then views is the second element in there, which gives it index value 1. And then the date is the third value, which has index value 2. Okay? So now all we have to do to get that as an entry into our SQL database and table every time is cursor.execute, and then in single quotes now, because we're doing it all in this line, we're going to say insert into sample, that's the table, and then here are the values. So all caps, say the values. Now the thing is, we can't just say name, views, date, because this is just a string as far as SQL knows. So the syntax is very specific here using SQL 3. You have to put question marks there because that is how it knows to look for a secondary variable passed in that are actually the parameters you're sending. So the parameters inside of these parentheses, making it a tuple, making it a sort of secondary list being passed into this cursor.execute. This is your SQL command. Here are the variables that are going to be replacing the question marks in the order you put them in. So name, views, date. And you can experiment with messing this order up. You're going to get data in the wrong order. But so then, very important at the end of changing anything in your SQL data. So we didn't have to do this next step when we created the table in the database. It happens as soon as you run that code. But if you change the data inside your database, you need to commit data or no changes will be saved. Okay, and this is really, really simple. It's just connection.commit. But anytime you change data, if you forget this line and then you have your connection.close, you're going to go look at the data inside of your connection, and it's not going to tell you anything meaningful because nothing will have changed. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this one for inserting the data. And again, if it works properly, all it's going to do is return nothing because we're not reading any data out of the database currently. We're just stuffing our data in. And again, most IDEs don't have a good way of reading this. So if you go in here, you're going to see something that kind of looks like the data you just put in there, but in some sort of janky, messed up way because most IDEs don't know how to read this. So let's take a look next at how to get the data that is now inside the database read into our Python project. A lot of the time, that's what we're trying to do anyways, is access the database, pull the data into Python, and do something interesting with it. So now let's take a look at reading data back from SQL. Okay, so as I said in the inserting data section, I'm not going to retype these 4 lines for each one. It would just chews up too much time, but you have to still have the module in here, and you still need your connection and cursor, and always just throw that .close in right at the beginning so you don't accidentally leave it open. All right, but let's say we want to fetch all of the data from a table, in SQL database. Okay, so the command for this is super easy. It is cursor.execute, right, which is how we send commands to SQL. And the command itself is just going to be select, and then SQL uses this star or asterisk to mean all, and then from the table sample. So if you want to do more complicated things with this, like you want to add where to the end and say only where there's a specific condition met, we're going to take a look at how to do things like that in the next sections. But for now, let's just say we want to get all of the data out of this table, and then we're going to mess with it in Python a little bit later. We want to store all fetched data, I got to spell it right, fetched data inside results variable. Okay, so just executing, grabbing all the data isn't enough yet. We need to make a variable that I call results, and then it's cursor dot, and then this fetch all command that's built into SQL 3. And now we have all of the data in this results variable. So let's take a look at what we just got. Let's say for I in results, and then colon, let's print I. So this is going to go through results, which will be a list as we grab it from SQL. And we're going to print each row from that list in this for loop. And then we'll go ahead and close the connection. So now if you remember, we created the table in the database that should have these 3 columns for every entry. We sent this list of data to the database. Now let's go ahead and run this and see what we get back from the database. Okay, so it looks perfect. We got all 4 of the videos that we made that we entered into the database, and now without like having that list anywhere here in Python, we are pulling it from SQL. So this is how you read data from a SQL table. In the next section, we're going to take a look at updating data in SQL. So you find out what the information in SQL looks like, but what if we need to make changes or modifications to it once we read it? Okay, so starting from our same 4 generic lines, let's take a look at what we want to do once we have read the data in, right? So going back to read data, whatever. Let's say that you looked at these and you said, Pac-Man's a little bit too generic. Like maybe you have a video where you cover Pac-Man in Python and then a separate one where you cover like Pac-Man in a game engine. And so you want to update that and make it a little more accurate or a little more detailed of a title. So I want to take a item where the title is Pac-Man and I want to change it to Python Pac-Man. Well, to do this, all I have to do is 2 lines, cursor.execute, should look familiar by now. And then instead of quotes here, because I'm going to need to use a SQL string inside of these quotes, I'm going to use the Python triple apostrophe, which is just another way to show a block of text or strings. And now the command to update text in SQL is update. So that is really nice. It's really nice how logical a lot of these instructions are. Let's update the table sample and set the column vid name, right? So if you forget your column names, you can go back to the table and database where you set them. And remember, we said vid name is equal to what we're going to make the name for the video. So set vid name equal to, and we'll say Python Pac-Man where. Now this is where I said, like in the select, in the read data section, after you have your select from or your set, you can add this instruction where you're adding conditionals to basically say, I don't just want to set every video name equal to Python Pac-Man. I want to do it where the existing video name is just equal to Pac-Man. Okay, so here are those single quotes that I was talking about. And since SQL looks for single quotes around strings like this, we're going to use the 3 apostrophes to define where our SQL command starts and stops. But that is all we have to do to execute the actual name change of the data. And you'll see I ended it with a semicolon. SQL likes ending lines and instructions and commands with semicolons. And then, again, remembering back to a few sections ago, we have to do connection.commit now because we have changed the data inside of SQL. So if I run this, let's go ahead and run updating data. And you can see I just get the finished with exit code 0. So it didn't throw an error. But now if we go back to read data, and let's go ahead and read the data now. You can see it says Python Pac-Man, which is what we changed it to instead of just Pac-Man. So that is how you update data. Next, let's take a look at how you would delete data from Python. Okay, so to kick off the deleting of data from Python, I'm going to leave everything from the previous one except the cursor.execute line. I'm going to leave commit because if we're deleting data, then obviously we are changing the data, so we need to have that commit line in there too right away. So the only thing we're changing between updating and deleting is our execution, so our command that we send to SQL. We're going to start with the 3 quotes again, but now instead of delete or update, it's delete. Okay, so again, super logical. And we're going to say from our sample table, and now we need to say what we want to delete. I don't just want to delete everything from the table. You can do that if you want to. We'll cover that in the next piece, which is a bit of a practice problem. But we're going to delete from the sample where, and I'm going to look at my 4 videos down here. And actually, if I'm thinking about it as the owner of the channel, well, this is a Python video, this is a Python video, this is a Python video, this is just me talking about some stuff. So maybe I don't want that in there. So I'm going to say, okay, delete data where the video name is equal to, and then the video name was controls top 5. Okay, that's what I called it in my table, and then semicolon. And now if I execute this line, that is all I have to do to get rid of data that I don't want. So I'm going to run that. I get my exit code 0, meaning there's no errors. Let's go back to read data. And I pull it in now, and you can see it's just Python Pac-Man, read from text in Python, Python Excel. So the only things I've kept in here were Python videos. I got rid of that extra entry. Okay, so that is it for deleting data, a very quick crash course. Again, if you have specific questions on anything you saw in here or I went too fast, let me know about in the comments below. If there is enough interest, I will do a deeper dive into SQL concepts in Python. Hopefully you have found what you're looking for in these sections. If you want to stick around, I'm going to do one pretty interesting thing, which is practice grabbing all of the data from a SQL table, parsing it out in Python, removing duplicate entries, and then sending it back to SQL. So using Python to get rid of duplicates from a data set. So we're going to do that next using the concepts that we just learned. But if you want to try doing that, then I suggest go back to insert data, run it several times with the same set of data. So like for me, I just ran it 4 times. And now if I run reading data real quick, you're going to see I have this really long data set because insert data doesn't check to see if there are already rows of that data in there. And so I have all of these duplicates now. And so what we're going to do in the next section is talk about how to delete those duplicates using Python. If you want to try this problem before looking at the solution and going through it with me, this is a really great spot to pause the video and test your understanding of what we did, because just using the concepts that we know here and some basic Python, you can get rid of all the duplicates. So try that problem, and then I'm going to show you how I did it, and we're going to go through it together next. Okay, so let's dive into the problem of how do I remove all of these duplicates in a SQL dataset using Python code. So we can do this with just the concepts covered in this video. It is a really great way of testing your understanding of these concepts. But looking through the list, you can see I have way too much data in here. It doesn't make sense for my SQL table to store all of these multiple times. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by getting all of the data into Python, into a Python list. Then we are going to modify that list in Python to remove duplicates using really easy list operations in Python. Then we are going to overwrite the data that is in the SQL database to just have the data that we want to do it. And we can do all of this using just the concepts covered in this video. So let's get started with how I did it. Again, as with almost anything in programming, there's a bunch of right solutions. So if you tested this and tried this on your own and your way works, that doesn't mean that my way is better or more efficient. It just means that there are a lot of ways to skin a cat and you found one of them. So good job if you were able to get this working. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about the solution we do together. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is select all of the data from the database. Okay, so select star from sample, just like when we read the data. The only difference is now I don't actually want to just read the data in my results variable. So just like before, it's this cursor dot fetch all and then execute select from sample, but I'm not just going to print it on the screen now. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for I in results just like before, but now I'm not just going to print it on the screen. I'm going to check and see if results.count, which now this is a Python operation. So if the count of I is greater than 1, this is a Python way of saying if the value I, which is the individual line entry in our results table that you can see down here, well, if the number of times that exists in my Python list is greater than 1, then what do I want to do? I want to remove all but one of those. So I want to say for j in range results.count I minus 1. So if my count is greater than 1, I have 2, 3, 4 of an entry, then for whatever that number is minus 1, I want to just come in and very simply do results.remove the value I. Okay, so I'm going to remove that. If it's in there 4 times, I'm going to remove 3 of them. And that is all we have to do. Now I am going to show what we did there and say for I in results print I. And what's cool is we haven't changed any data yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just comment out the commit line for a second. And what we'll be able to do here is see what's happening in Python, but we're not yet overwriting the data in our SQL table. So if I run this, run deleting duplicates. okay, you can see I get just one of each line. And you can actually see I have Pac-Man and Python Pac-Man because they're not identical. So when I ran my inserting data line, it sent a bunch of lines that said Pac-Man in there, but my updating data, I didn't run that again to change all of them to Pac-Man Python. So I can do that just to get rid of the those duplicates. I can run updating this. And now if I do deleting duplicates and run that again, you'll see now, because I got rid of all the ones that just say Pac-Man, they say Python Pac-Man. This is giving us a Python list that gets rid of all the duplicates. But if I look back at just reading data, you'll see the actual list of data in SQL still has all those duplicates, because all we're doing here is getting rid of duplicates in Python. But ultimately, we want to send those back to SQL and say you don't need duplicates. We're going to overwrite the data. So to do that, what we're going to do here is now do cursor.execute and then delete from sample. And so if we don't put any like where or as or anything else like that, it is going to delete everything from the samples table, which is actually what we want, because now we have the data for I in results. We have all of the data that we want to send to that table. So we're going to start by clearing everything that's currently in there out. All right, and for I in results, cursor.execute. So we're going to write the data that we do want to send them back in one at a time. And we're going to do it a little bit more efficiently than we did in our first insert data. All right, so insert into sample, that's our table, and then here are the values. And again, because we're doing this in a for loop, they're going to be question mark, question mark, question mark, because we need them to be variable. All right, and now the parameters that we're passing in, rather than doing that like name, views, date, we are just going to say I character 0, I index 1, and then I index 2. So this is a little bit less clear than what we did in insert data, where we named them name, views, and date, but it allows you to eliminate 3 lines of code and 3 intermediate variables. I just wanted to be super clear the first time showing you guys this piece of code. So this is all we need to do to say insert these 3 values, our video name, our view count, and our date, into our sample table. And now let's go ahead and commit the data that we do change, and let's take a look at it now. So I'm going to run deleting duplicates, and you can see again it's showing us this line here. So it's showing us our Python list, same as before. So let's go to our reading data function, that all this does is reads the data that's currently in there. And let's see if we did get rid of the duplicates. Okay, and check out that data. So now we just have one of each type. And if we were to run insert data again, we could read it, and what we're going to find is, okay, now we have 2 of each. But if I run my updating data function again, I change it to just 2 of Python Pac-Man, and then I can run my deleting duplicates, and all of a sudden, all I have in SQL is 1 line of each video. So I hope you found this tutorial super useful. I really think that combining this SQL database with Python, which is one of the just best, easiest to understand programming languages, you can unlock some really cool projects, and a lot of careers and career paths rely on SQL and Python. So if you had questions or you want to see a deeper dive into the applications of SQL and Python, let me know. I'd like to at some point in the future combine pandas, which is a Python module, with Python and SQL, but I only want to make that kind of content if there's a real interest in it. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know with a like. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. Check out the Patreon link down there if you feel overwhelming amounts of gratitude, and let me know what you want to see next on the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.